Greetings all and welcome to Lucas Sprues. In today's video we'll be having a look at the 2000 Revell 1/72 scale Heinkel 177A5 with Fritz-X guided bombs, and also comparing it to the 2007 177A6 with the HS-293 guided missiles. So without further ado, let's have a look at these two kits. So starting out by having a look at the box. As is typical for Revell kits of the time, we have a very nice blue bordered box with some really pretty artwork that's sort of done by hand, and it shows a squadron of Heinkel 177s flying into the clouds with a couple of 190s as escort, and it looks really beautiful with the lighting, so very nicely done. On the bottom of the box here we have a colour guide for Revell's colours that they recommend, along with some details about what's included in the kit, saying that it's got new moulds, detailed surface structures, flush metal joints, whatever that means, detailed cockpit with numerous instrument panels, detailed seats, a cockpit floor pan with MG151 and MG131, and entrance hatch with movable cannon, detailed bomb bays, 2 500kg bombs, detailed landing gear, optionally extended or retracted, movable propellers, counter-rotating, and 3 Fritz-X guided missiles that can be fitted, and some super decal sheets for 2 camouflage schemes. So not super as in what Italy would call super, where you've got like 6 or 4 schemes, but just 2. But anyways, then we've got some really lovely pictures of a finished model there on the sides there of a prototype, and you can see some really nice details like all the little access hatches, really lovely details on that Fritz-X bomb there, and all of those recessed panel lines looking quite nice. And you can see we've got those little hatches for the, or the hatch there for the rear gunner. And yeah, some nice detail on the front of the engine there. On the top of the box here, we have a bit of history about the development and operational service of the Heinkel 177, along with a little bit of detail about the Fritz-X and what it was sort of developed from. So some nice bits of history there. We've got various warnings as well here, and sort of details about what this kit's dimensions are. We've got a barcode. The sides of the box are just the box art repeated along with the titles, for this one being Heinkel 177A5 Greif or Greif with Fritz-X bombs, and we've got the scale and a skill level on the bottom there. And finally, on the back of the box, as is typical for Revell, we've got a few of their other kits advertised, along with more details about how their scale system works and some of their other products. Now this box has already been opened on both sides as I got it second hand, but all of the plastic parts are sealed. And as you'll see, we've also got some decals and some nice edgy-wide masks to have a look at. So I'll open this all up. And we'll kick things off by having a little bit of a detailed look at the instructions. So on the front of these instructions, we've got a black and white picture of a prototype model. And again, we've got a history of the aircraft and the weapon systems that it's using with the Fritz-X. And it goes into a bit more detail than what was on the box art. We've got some dimensions of the real aircraft, such as its size, its engine performance, operational weight and range, armament crews, and we've also got some dimensions for the Fritz-X and its speed capabilities, so that's all very interesting. Opening up, we've then got more warnings in various languages. We've got security text as it's described here, just talking a bit about paint and glue and not eating anything and all of that sort of stuff. Then we've got more warnings and guides on how to go about assembling this kit. So if this is your first kit, that might be handy to have a read of, but otherwise I'd imagine most people who are tackling this rather large build are probably going to have a bit of experience. We've got various sprue maps here. They've got just the part numbers, but no actual identifier for the sprues, as in A or B. But you can still see pretty clearly what all of these parts are, and we've got what looks like a few parts that are unused, sort of grayed out. So we've got 2 sprue map pages there. Here we've got our keys, so all of the different things you might have to do when assembling the kit. And we've also got our colour guide. So Revell have done this sort of letter system for the various colours. And then they've also got, I believe, the Revell code along with just a name for all of the colours. So not particularly specific, and it might be a little bit tricky to get equivalents or match them perfectly. So you're going to have to do a little bit of research most likely to get the right colour. But then opening the page, we've got more colours up the top there, so quite an extensive colour guide there. But once you've gotten through all of that, you've then got the assembly. As is typical for most model kits, you start assembly with the interior. So for step 1 and 2, we've got various seats that require a little bit of assembly. Then for step 3, we've got some rudder pedals. Step 4 consists of the main yoke for the controls, and then we've got another set of instruments and various panels there. Step 5 is adding one of the rear gunner, or the engineer I believe, his seat on the cockpit floor there. Then we've got these little knobs here, which I believe are more parts of the rudder pedals, or perhaps controls of some kind. And what looks like the bomb sight. We've got some sidewall panels here and a radio stack in the rear. Plus we've got this sort of little bulkhead with what looks like some seat details molded into it. And even more sidewall details here to be added. Then we've got step 7, we're adding those seats, the yoke and the rudder assembly that we've come up with previously. And step 8 is the main instrument panels and another stack to the right. So like with most German cockpits, there seems to be little tiny panels absolutely everywhere. Then on the roof, we've got more instrument panels along with what looks like a mirror of some kind, which gets attached to this main sort of section of the clear canopy. Then there's a front section of the canopy with a little machine gun, which apparently if you don't glue into place, you can still move around by the looks of things, seeing as we've got a no glue indicator. Then we've got this little thing here, which I believe is for catching the spent rounds from the machine gun that sort of rests on the front there. Then we attach the fuselage to the cockpit section there, and we've also got a few little windows to add into place. Although I'm tempted for some of these ones to maybe just use some crystal clear instead and sort of thread it over the gaps there rather than using these, just to make them a little bit more transparent. Then for the other side of the aircraft, we've got a few more little bits of things to add, like some sort of storage bin by the looks of things. And we've got quite a lot of instrument detail molded to the sidewall there, which has to get painted up. And as you can see, we've sort of got these vague kind of color guides there, saying B is the main color of the, B, dust gray matte. So it doesn't really say a color code other than matte 77, which I'm assuming is Revell's code for it. But yeah, anyways, so you've got a vague estimation of colors and some little guides there. Moving on to the next step, we have some assembly of the weapon systems. So this looks like the, I think it was a 20mm cannon that sort of fits below the fuselage. We've got this little sight system and a little clear transparent turret or kind of observation window. And by the looks of things, it's designed so you can move it if you don't glue certain parts to this kind of fuselage section there. Then we've got one of the machine gun turrets here. Again, there looks to be an option to not glue some of the parts so that you can move the guns, which is a nice little option there if you want. Then we've got a clear turret here with some sight systems and another machine gun with a little seat there. Once again, don't glue certain parts and you should be able to, by the looks of things, elevate the machine gun and also rotate the turret. We've got more not gluing of parts, and this is for the tail wheel by the looks of things. So if you sort of join the two halves and then slot them to the tail wheel strut there, you should be able to move the wheel. And then you attach that to what looks like a little bit of interior framework. Then we've got another seat by the looks of things. I suspect this is for the rear gunner. Starting to add windows to the rear section of the fuselage and adding in some bulkheads for, I believe, the bomb bay area and, of course, the tail wheel. Looks like we've got an option here to paint the bomb bay, and I suspect that's just saying if you're not going to have it open, you can just leave it unpainted, which I guess is handy, tells you. Looks like we've got another bulkhead that has to get added in, but I'm not quite sure how you do it. Because it looks like you've already joined the fuselage halves there, so that's a little bit confusing. But anyways, after you've installed that, you can then add the main window sections there, and it says to not glue one of the parts. I suspect it's saying that you could basically move, or if you didn't glue this, it would be able to sit flush, so you could pull it in and out if you wanted to. Which I might do because I like doing animations every now and again with my models, so good chances are I'll try and get access to the cockpit if I can. Then we've got the machine gun or the cannon there, and I might have been mistaken because it looks like it's facing forwards, so that might be for the front of the aircraft rather than the rear. But moving on, we then have another machine gun or cannon for the rear. I believe that's another 20mm. And it sort of gets installed into this little complicated looking joint here with another little piece that goes on top of that. And once you've done that, you can attach that to the fuselage there. Then we've got the rear turret area glazing, and by the looks of things, you've got the option to have the canopy open or closed like we saw on the box. Then we've got our bomb bay here, which is quite a large single piece that gets glued into place. Again, it's saying there's an option to not glue the bomb bay, and I'm not quite sure why. Perhaps it's saying that you could theoretically swap out the bomb bay for just the cover if you wanted to have it with the bomb bay doors open and then closed. So I might need to have a little look at the parts, or when I'm assembling it, pay attention to those sorts of things. But then we've got the rear machine gun or cannon. I believe that might be a heavy machine gun, so like a 12-13 mil kind of thing for the rear there, which gets attached to this glazed piece. Then moving on, you've got the turrets, which can be added into place. Again, there's an option to not glue the rear turret here and the observation windows, so maybe that's for access again. Bit of an interesting option, but anyways, this kit seems to have quite a lot of those. Don't glue this, and you can take it off your model if you wanted to. Then we've got the tail wheel doors, which if you want in the open position, you'll have to cut up and glue into place. But otherwise, if you want the aircraft in flight, you can just glue that straight on and not bother with the tail wheel. Turning over the page here, we've got the wing halves, which come in 2 sections for each side. And it looks like you have to do a little bit of drilling if you want to add those Fritz-X attachment points to the underside of the wings. Otherwise, though, you could just glue them and then attach them to the fuselage. For the engines here, we've got the option to attach the spinner and put this sort of washer into place. And if you don't glue that to the engine cowling, then it will be able to rotate the propeller blades, which is a nice little feature if you want it. Then we've also got the cow flaps and a spinner to attach. As you can see, we have to assemble 2 of these engines, but we've got a left and a right with the propeller blades. And that's because they were counter-rotating so that you didn't have that torque effect. So it was nice and easy on takeoff and whenever you're adding a bit of power. And then we have a rather large amount of steps dedicated to the various exhausts and I believe a bit of cooling systems. So you've got these 2 exhausts on the top there. Then on the underside we've got even more. I'm not too sure if that's part of a supercharging or turbocharging system. I don't believe it was turbocharged, but I could be mistaken. Although these do look like some sort of venting for either cooling or for superchargers. So yeah, quite a lot of detail there to add. Probably best to do that though after you've painted the camouflage, I reckon, and that's probably how I'll go about doing that. But once you've assembled all of those pieces, you've then got some extra details for the outer wing here with these little joints for the ailerons and these counterbalances. We've got a rather large pitot tube for the right side of the aircraft by the looks of things. Oh no, sorry, that's the left. Then we've got a landing gear light as well for the left side. And once again, more options to not glue parts if you want to, and that's for a washer system for the main wheels. We've sort of got this system of 2 struts for each set of wheels, and as you can see, we've got to assemble each one twice. So once you've attached this piece to the main strut there, added the first half of the wheel, glued in place the washer, and then added the outer wheel part, you can then add those onto each side of the aircraft. So you've got 2 sets of left, 2 sets of right, and you put 1 on each side there. Plus you've then got these little struts that stick out to add a little bit more structure. Then we've got some landing gear doors that have to be added into place. And if you want them open, you're going to have to cut them up and then glue them into place, like with the tail wheel. Or if you're not doing the landing gear, you just basically glue that single landing gear cover into place. I believe there are some larger doors here, but it looks like they're molded to the main wheel, so you can't have those extended. I don't believe they were extended unless the landing gear was being retracted, so that looks pretty accurate if the aircraft's on the ground. But I'm sure if you wanted to, you could probably open those up for maintenance. Moving on, we've then got our horizontal stabilizers with the elevators molded into them, and some extra linkages that have to be added for the elevators. The rudder comes as 2 halves there, which you then glue into place. Interestingly, it doesn't look like any of the control surfaces can be moved, which I'm a little bit surprised given how much of the other parts in this kit it seems to have options to not glue for some reason. Then we've got our 2 500 kilogram bombs with 2 halves and then a little bit of structure at the back there for the fins. And it looks like we've only got the rear part of the bomb bay with the option to have it open, and you've got to drill some holes in the front section, and that's to add the Fritz-X attachment point. I believe there's another version of this kit, or the newer one, where you can have the entire bomb bay just with the 500 kilogram bombs, so you have the option to open them up. But for this particular one, they haven't mentioned that, but I think there probably are parts that we saw grayed out earlier for that anyways. Moving on, we've then got the attachment point to add for the Fritz-X with the large arms there to sort of hold onto them. I'm sure there's a better term. Looks like the bombs have to be attached to these little attachment points as well and then glued into place. But it is a little bit confusing there.
or we have the option to glue the bomb bay shut, and then you don't have to worry about those bombs at all. We've got various little antennas and radio masts, and a hatch there for accessing the rear that can be opened or closed, along with this other little antenna here. We've got our main access hatch for the cockpit area, which can be open or closed. If you're going to close it, you're going to have to cut the ladder and this little piece off, and if you're opening it, you've also got these little struts. I'm surprised they don't have an option for that to be open and closed, but I guess with the ladder it would have to slide out, which would be a bit fiddly. Then we've got another large antenna on the roof of the aircraft this time. And turning over the page, the last thing to assemble are the Fritz-X guided missiles. We've got two main halves of the body, then a nose cone and the little outlet for the rockets and the little framework for holding the fins. Then you attach all of the various fins into place. And to attach them onto the aircraft, you've got these two outer pylons and then the center pylon for the middle there. And that's pretty much it for assembly. We've then got, of course, our marking guides, and there are two schemes included. The first one here is from KG 100. That was based in, and excuse my French, Château-d'Eun. That was probably awful. I apologize. But basically, I think these ones were based in France doing the anti-shipping roll. And that's in 1944, so towards the end of the war there. And it appears to be finished in a rather interesting scheme. On the underside is RLM 65, which was like the early to mid-war kind of blue that they were using on the fighters, and I think they used it on bombers for the entire war. You've got RLM 02, which is like the very early cockpit color that was used in most of their aircraft, and I think the fighters used it early on as well for daylight camouflage, but obviously that's for these little blotches there. And then we've got RLM 73, which I'm not 100% sure I know. I suspect it's like a mid-war kind of camouflage, but I'll probably correct myself anyways. And there are some other little things to paint, like the exhausts, and I think the spinners are a different color as well. Personally, though, I'm not a huge fan of these marking guides because it's a bit hard to see where everything is because it's black and white. They're also really quite small for an aircraft of this size, so seeing exactly where all of these little complicated splotches are placed is a bit tricky, so probably better to just find reference photos of the real aircraft. And turning over the page, we've then got a second aircraft from KG-40, and it was based in Bordeaux, again in part of France, and it's from the end of 1944. And it's got a bit more of a conventional color scheme with RLM 76 all over, which was like the late war kind of greyish blue for fighters. And then you've got a darker RLM 75 for some splinter kind of splotches on the top of the aircraft there. Again, a darker coloured spinner, although it doesn't look like it actually tells you what colour to paint them, which is a bit annoying. And it's got some common stencil positionings here for the walkway markings, but most of the other markings are just on this single sheet. So as you can see, these colour guides are not very good, and the instructions are a little bit confusing with all of the not gluing of parts. Although for the most part, I think for a complicated aircraft, they've laid out all the steps pretty clearly and nice and slow, so you don't miss anything. So yeah, it's just really the marking guides that are a little bit disappointing, but they are kind of typical for Revell at the time. I will grab out the newer instructions, which I think I still have, because I did actually do the newer kit, although I didn't make a video of it, and I didn't really do a good job of it, so I am tempted to strip it back and redo it, which might be a future video. But anyways, I'll grab out those new instructions to sort of compare them. So for Revell's more recent release of the Heinkel 177A5, as you can see, it's all printed in colour with the much more modern style of instructions, which I think is a lot better. The instructions on how to assemble the kit are also simplified and really easy to follow and understand. The symbols are even clearer with the colours added to them. Then you've got a much clearer colour guide as well, seeing as you can actually see what the colours are. Plus we've also got much clearer codes for all of the colours, which is great. And as you can see, much easier to tell what you're supposed to paint everything because they're done in colour. The main assembly is just white, but if you have to paint anything at any stage, it's very obvious and very clear to see. And as you can see with the marking guide, it is a lot clearer, not only where all the decals are, but also what colours you're painting. They've included the RLM codes for all of those colours that are German, which is really great. And yeah, two schemes again in this kit, and they are quite similar in terms of the colours, but very different in how they're applied. With this one, there's a lot more of the squiggly, and I think they did have a technical term for the markings. And then with this one, it's a little bit more blotchy. So now that we've had a look at the instructions, let's move on to have a look at the plastic parts, which all come in this one sealed bag here, which I will open up. We've got quite a few sprues here, with most of them being quite large. Interestingly, our wings are in a separate bag here, as well as our clear parts. Really glad that they did this with the clear parts, as that protects them from scratching. Fortunately, none of the parts seem to have come loose, even though this is a bit of an older kit, so they've stood the test of sitting in storage pretty well. And we might as well start off with our main fuselage here, so I'll pop these out of the way for now. So having a look at this sprue, we've got all of our tyres for the main wheels, along with the main fuselage sections, and we've got what looks like 6 bodies for 500 kilogram bombs. So for the wheels there, you've got some nice raised details for parts of the rubber, and then you've got really nicely done recessed hubs there, which look quite decent. For the outer wheel part here, we've also got some extra added details, which are all raised, which look pretty good. And for the fuselage, we've got recessed panel lines there with some pretty good detail, especially with all those little access hatches along the sides of the fuselage there. And they have done a few little raised parts here and there with these little sort of intakes there, which I'd imagine are for ventilation and that sort of thing. Interestingly, they're all on the right side, but there's nothing on the left side. And the bombs there, they're all pretty cleanly molded, with the exception of these two here, which have quite a lot of flash there. But luckily for this particular, or the 2 schemes in this kit, looks like you only need 2 of them, so you can pick the best ones. On the inside of the fuselage, we have a copyright for the tooling, which I'll turn that around, and is dated for 2000. Then we've got some raised ribbing for the main sort of mid-turret section here, and some more ribbing for the rear tail gunner section. For the cockpit area, we've actually got some recessed instrument dials on the walls there, which I suspect are for all of the engines. And they've done quite a nice job, actually. They're really quite fine and very hard to see, but with a little bit of dry brushing, hopefully I can get a decent result. And then for the rest of the fuselage, they've done some sort of paneling, which kind of covers all the ribbing, which is interesting. Don't usually see that in a World War II bomber, or at least not that much. Although there is a fair bit of raised ribbing on the underside there, where the machine guns and I think bombardier sort of area is placed. On the other side, there's also some more paneling that sort of covers up all of the ribbing, so a little bit more luxurious than some other aircraft I've seen. And for the most part, these sprues are pretty cleanly molded. You've got some little guide pins to help line everything up. Doesn't appear to be too much flash. There's a few tiny little bits here and there. But apart from that bomb in the corner there, nothing really major that can't be sanded away. So yeah, pretty good. And there's also quite a nice and clean area for the wing spars to attach to, with some nice little locking guide rail kind of things there to help line them up. So that all looks pretty good. Next, we've got our 2 wing sprues here, which also are done with all recessed details, with a couple of little raised bits here and there. For the underside, you can see you've got all these little access hatches, and I think these are supposed to imitate locks or some sort of access hatch. We've got the landing gear doors there, a little bit more pronounced by the looks of things than some of the other recesses. And they've done a pretty nice job separating the aileron there from the flaps, with quite a deep kind of engraving there, so that might be a little bit exaggerated. I was at first thinking that might be a mistake, but it looks like it's part of the trim tab system, and they've actually done it on all of the wings there. We've got some radiator details here for part of the intake system there, and that looks pretty nicely done with all those raised panels. And they've done a nice job actually molding it in a sort of open position. I'm sure if you really wanted to close it up, you could, but I'd imagine most of the time it would be open to stop the thing from overheating. And then for the upper wings here, we've got a few more access hatches for fuel and oil and all sorts of things. They've done a really nice job doing some recessed latches on all of those access hatches and the little rivets, so that's pretty nicely done. And yeah, same sort of level of detail, and everything is quite cleanly molded. There's a little bit of raised details for the inside of the wheel wells there, but you can't really see too much of it. And you can't really see too much anyways through some of the framework on the underside there, and I'd imagine it's going to be quite largely hidden by the wheels sort of sticking out there. So yeah, wings look pretty good as well. On this sprue here, we've kind of got these small sub-sprues that are attached to this main point here, so they are a little bit flimsy. But it appears to contain our attachment points for the Fritz-X bombs, which have some rather large sink marks in the parts there. Fortunately, they'll be hidden if the Fritz-X's are attached, but if not, that might be a little bit noticeable. Although I don't think it's too bad. It probably could be excused as some stressed metal effects on them, but it probably is a little bit exaggerated and not quite accurate. Then we've got our middle section of the bomb bay doors there. There's all these ejector pin marks on it, so probably not best for having them open, but I believe you're not supposed to on this particular version of the kit. And then we've got all of our Fritz-X bombs here, which have their little fins there with I think they had flares attached to these, so you could see it. And all of those little recessed rivets and access hatches on the bombs look really awesome. And they've done a really nice job doing all the rocket motors in them, all the little outlets and all of those fin details. They are all quite good. There's a few little bits of flash on them, but nothing too major. And yeah, I really love those little recessed details on all of those bits there. They're quite fantastic. Looks like we've got some turrets here with some interesting little bits of detail and equipment there, which looks quite nice. We've got our rear gunner's seat back there and another little turret. Although, unfortunately, it's got a fair bit of flash on it that's going to be a bit tricky to clean up by the looks of things. Although it's not the end of the world. We've got what looks like part of the rear turret attachment point there. Looks like some sort of armored shield for one of the guns, and another seat back. I think that might be attached to the rear gunner's seat there. And we've got a little machine gun there for the, I think it's a 7mm for one of the positions. And we've got our rudder here with some really nice recessed details for the panel lines, access hatches, and the tabs there. So for the most part, pretty nicely molded, although there are a few bits with some rather nasty flash that's going to be a bit tricky to clean up. On this sprue here, we have our bomb bay, which has some really fantastic raised ribbing details and little attachment points for the bombs. So I'm thinking you might not actually need to glue anything to the bombs, you just sort of fit them on. I've done a really nice job, I think, molding that as one piece there. That looks really quite nice. We've then got these little parts. I think these are either for the ailerons or the elevator, these little hinges there. And then we've got these little bits of framework for the 500 kilogram bombs. We've got our main engine cowlings there with some fantastically done recessed details for all of the radiators that are sort of arranged, I think, annually around the engines there, which look great. I've got our tailwheel sort of bay with not too much detail, but it's cleanly molded and it's got the shape there. We've got quite a lot of these little, what do you call it, like washers for, I believe, the propellers as well as the wheels. Then we've got our propeller blades here. We've got 2 sets of 4 blades, and we've got them facing different angles for the different directions that they would rotate. Got our main spinners here, plus the hub for the propellers there. So I'm hoping that these propellers are going to fit quite snugly into these parts there, but we'll have to see when I'm actually building it. I'm not too sure what these parts are. They might be some sort of locking hub or detail, but they look quite cleanly done. We've got our main landing gear struts there, which are quite nicely done with all of the pistons, or I guess actuators there, which look great. Got our main sort of wheel doors there that will be attached to these, and on the inside there is some quite nice recessed and raised detailing there for the framework. Got our main bomb bay section that will be open, and there's quite a fair bit of flash actually on the corners, which will need cleaning up, but for the most part still pretty decent. Quite a lot of other little things here. We've got these little exhaust stubs there, which are quite nicely done. Various control linkages, and these counterbalances, I believe, are for the ailerons. Well, we've got our strut here for the tail wheel, which has some really excellent details. Although there is a bit of a nasty seam line running down the middle there. It's not the end of the world. You can probably clean that up with a little bit of sanding. Or perhaps a knife would be easier. Then we've got our various complicated parts for the exhaust and I think the supercharging system. So we've got those little intakes and then these sort of circular exhaust outlet looking things. And we've got our linkages here for the main landing gear. Again, a little bit of flash on them, but for the most part, not too badly done. Our final light grey sprue contains the horizontal stabilizers with the elevators molded into place with some, again, very nicely done recessed detailing and access hatches that all looks quite good. Then in the corner here, we have what looks like the mounting system for these cannons. Then we've got what looks like some sort of door or perhaps a stowage bin for the side of the aircraft. We've got that strange piece here, which is supposed to be added after you've joined the fuselage halves somehow. We've got our tail wheel here, which is massive. It's pretty much the size of like a 190's main wheel, but even thicker. So very chunky tyres. And they've done a really nice job with recessed tyre tread pattern there and some very nice hub center details, which look good. Various little antennas and rings and that sort of thing. Then we've got our radio stack here, which looks absolutely fantastic. There's some really nicely done raised and recessed detailing on them. That's going to be a lot of fun to try and dry brush. We've got that sort of tube or piping system, which I think catches the spent shells. And then we've got our small machine gun here for the nose section, I believe. We've got some more access hatches with some raised wiring details and trim wheels and all sorts of very nicely done details there. Again, this kit's cockpit is going to be a lot of fun to try and dry brush, I reckon. Hopefully I can get a really nice bit of detail out of it as it is. You've got the center kind of console here with what looks like, I think I can even make out like a compass with the little aircraft in the middle. So some really crisp and fantastic fine details there. And the upper panel here for the top of the cockpit looks really great as well. We've also got some details for the control column. Again, fantastically done. A really nice looking bomb bay. I think this is the mount for the yoke, so the control column, which has a little bit of a fabricy or leather kind of texture for the attachment point there. So some really nicely done details. And another machine gun here. So yeah, really fantastically done details there. All very crisp and cleanly molded. I'm very impressed with that. We've got some more parts for various turrets. There are a few little bits of flash on these parts here, but nothing too major. Again, more machine gun barrels, which all look pretty good. Some other little details for parts of the cockpit. And then we've got the cockpit floor itself with some really, again, crisp and clear details for the engine controls and the monitoring or the gauges for all of them. And yeah, quite nicely done by the looks of things. A little bit of flash here and there, but nothing that can't be cleaned up. And here we've got our seats, or most of them at least, with the main one here for the pilot in two sections. Looks like, I think, an engineer's seat here, and then another seat for, I think, in this position there. So yeah, some really fantastic details. All of the seat belts are raised, and I think we might get decals included, but I'm not too sure for all of that. We've got this bulkhead here for accessing the bomb bay, or it's got windows at least, so you can see what's going on. And finally, in this corner, we've got our access hatch with the bladder molded open, and the little actuators there for if that's in the open position. Looks like there's a little bit of detail on the interior there, but I'm not too sure what those square holes are for. But hopefully it'll be a bit more clearer when I'm actually assembling the model. But yeah, again, really cleanly done for the most part, apart from a couple of little pieces here and there having some flash. Really impressed with the cockpit details there. They're fantastically done. It looks like there's a lot of detail out of the box and pretty impressive for the age of this kit. As I've mentioned, the clear parts come in their own little bag here, which is great as it protects them from getting scratched by other parts. So we'll have a look at those now. We've got a fair bit of flashing, unfortunately, on a lot of these clear sections here, which are going to have to get cleaned up. We've got our main window here, which has a fair few scratches and looks to be a bit thick. Although not terrible, in some places it does look a little bit worse. Although for the most part, distortion is relatively low. If you can kind of see my finger as I get further away, it becomes harder to see. So yeah, not the best quality by the looks of things for that main window. Looks like this upper window section is a little bit better. And I'm glad that the framework is pretty clear, so it should be easy to mask up. Although I'm glad I've got those edge-wide masks, which we'll have a look at in a second. We've got a lot of smaller windows here, which have to get fitted early on, as they've got these sort of divots to help them glue into place. Although I'm probably, like I said, going to just use crystal clear, as they are quite scratched on a few of these windows. These rounder kind of turrets, they've done a pretty good job of, I reckon. There's a few spots on them that are a little bit harder to see through and a few little scratches here and there, but for the most part, pretty good. We've got a few gauges here that are done in clear, which are going to be quite nice to paint up, I reckon. Looks like there's some raised detailing for the front of the dials, and then they've done a nice job doing the raised portions for the rear there, so going to have a lot of fun doing the detailed work on this kit. Although I am thinking it might be easier to just paint these up and use some gloss varnish to get the clear kind of effect of the gauges rather than trying to paint them from here. The rear turret windows, again, a little bit thick and distorted, and a few small scratches here and there, but not bad. And then we've got this really thick piece of glass here for the cannon's mounting point there, for the underside of the fuselage. And we've got the bombardier's window, which is again quite thick. So I am actually contemplating vacuuming these windows and seeing if I can get a better result. As you can fill them up with milliput, I've found, and then use the vacuum forming machine on them and get a slightly cleaner and more transparent result, but I'll see how we go. Otherwise though, I have seen you can get vacuum form options for canopies for the Heinkel 177, which might be a better option than these included. Although they're not terrible, I have seen a lot worse. They're still not great, and given that you're probably going to have a lot of time spent doing all of those details for the interior, it would be nice to have some really good windows as well. Now, obviously, because I got this kit secondhand, the decals are not going to be as great a quality as they might have originally been. However, for the most part, I find Revell decals to be pretty good, especially the newer ones. They definitely seem to be getting better with quality. These are probably slightly older than what they're doing at the moment, but as you can see, for the most part, pretty good. There is a little bit of dirt or possibly mold of some kind on these decals, so I might have to just put them in the water and see if that kind of comes off. In terms, though, of detail, they're actually really quite fantastic. Probably quite similar to cartograph, I'd say. You can read almost all of the really fine print if you can zoom in or get close enough, and all of the fuel placards and oil grades are really good there. Common stencils are pretty cleanly done. There doesn't appear to be any kind of weird film on them apart from that dust or whatever it is. And yeah, all of the clear walkway markings look really good, and all of the don't touch and don't push and all of that stuff looks great. So yeah, decals look really quite excellent for this kit, and I'm sure when they were brand new they would have been superb, but hopefully I'll still be able to use these older ones because apart from that mold, they look really great. As a little bonus, this secondhand kit also came with some Eduard masking, which is going to be excellent. A lot of clear parts on this kit, obviously, so it's going to be fantastic to be able to very easily just pop these on and have them covered rather than having to do any complicated masking techniques, which I'm still kind of getting the hang of. We've got this sheet here. I think it's just the one. Yeah, and then we've got some instructions, I think. Yeah, so we've got instructions here for masking everything up. So we've got all of our main windows masked up. We've got a few of the turrets as well, although they're very curved shaped, so it recommends liquid mask, which is a pretty good way to go. And as you can see, they're all pre-cut, so you can sort of just pop them off the sheet and put them on. They've even got a little bit of masking for the wheels as well, which is cool. You can then use liquid masking for most of it and paint the hub. Although I find I've got a steady enough hand with the brush that I'll probably just paint the wheels by hand. But for the canopies, really great. And for an aircraft that's got really large sections of glazing, really excellent. And they're even double-sided by the looks of things, because obviously you've got all of those smaller windows and the main kind of window section for the turret. And they're really excellent. Definitely recommend these masks, and I'm really glad that they came with this kit. I may see if I can actually use them twice, because I'd imagine they're probably still going to have a little bit of tackiness if you can carefully remove them, and that way I can use them on the other Heinkel 177. Otherwise, though, I might have to paint them by hand, as I think that's probably easier than trying to mask everything up, and given that the framework's really narrow on some of these windows, that might be an easier option. So that pretty much wraps up our look at the Heinkel 177A5 with the Fritz-X option. I believe for the newer release of the Heinkel 177, that's a bit easier to get a hold of. It's pretty much the exact same tooling, slightly different marking options as we saw when I had the instructions with me, but for the most part, still the same venerable tool. And for the most part, I think it's really quite an excellent kit. There's some really nice details, especially for the cockpit, and the weapon options are really great. I think it's excellent that they've done a bit of a more obscure but very iconic and recognizable aircraft from Heinkel, and although the clear parts aren't as great as some other kit makers, and there is a little bit of flash here and there, it still looks like it builds up to a really great kit. And there's plenty of aftermarket options as well for masking canopies, replacing them with vacuum form ones, and I'm sure you can get other decals as well if you didn't like the schemes included. So quite a good base point, and with a little bit of TLC you can probably get an excellent kit out of it, but even out of the box it still looks like a pretty enjoyable and nicely detailed build. And the other tooling I have here is the Heinkel 177A6, so a different variant of the 177. And this one also comes with the HS293, so a guided bomb system from Henschel, which I believe was again for anti-shipping purposes mainly. Very similar format with the box, same sort of artwork style, done in that very nice painted Revell style. And again, we've got those pictures of the finished model, this time with some focus on the different parts. The main difference is this slightly different turret for the A6. And we've got those HS123s, which fit in a similar position, but as you can see, they're a very different bomb. So I won't go into too much detail, as this is pretty much the exact same tool, just with a few extra bits, but we will have a slight look at what is different. Once again, our instructions are pretty much exactly the same. We've got a few extra options though for decals, even though I believe this was a bit more of an obscure variant. We've got a couple of extra sprues here, as you can see, one with a slightly different rudder here, along with the parts for the different turret. And then we've got the HS123s here, and as you can see, we're not going to be using any of the 500 kilogram bombs or the Fritz-X guided bombs, which are included normally. Opening up the page assembly, as you can see, is pretty much split again into all of those steps. The only difference here, as you can see, is we've got to cut the rear tail gunner section out and replace it with the turret, which is included as a step here. Otherwise, again, similar for everything else. And the only other difference is at the very end here, I believe, with the HS293s. I think they might even use the same mounting points as the Fritz-X's, but they basically consist of two halves, a set of wings, and then the horizontal stabilizer on the rocket part there. And then marking guide, pretty much the same. As I mentioned, we've got 3 schemes, I believe. Yep, we've got GPRH, GPSD, and KMUR. All of them are attached to HD131, which I believe was an experimental unit. And interestingly, in autumn of 1943, so a bit earlier than all of the other Heinkel 177 schemes that we've seen so far. I don't know too much detail about the program, but I don't think it ever really saw combat service. I think it was just in the testing phase. Maybe it saw a little bit of combat testing, but I think for the most part it was basically just they did a few tests and then had to stop because they were running out of fuel and the war was pretty much over. But still potential for a what if they got it operational build, or even just as the prototype for testing. Still quite a interesting little build. And having a brief look at what's different with the plastic parts, pretty much everything is exactly the same other than those extra ones. Unfortunately, we've lost a couple of bits here that have come off the sprues, which I'll have to pull out of the bag. As you can see, we've got our 3 HS293s there, which are quite nicely done. They've got recessed details for the controls on them, and some nice details on the actual body of the bomb itself, and I think that's like a fuel tank system, and then that's the rocket booster area, although I'm not too familiar with this kind of system. But yeah, for the most part, pretty nicely done. And yeah, there's a few nice little details here and there, although it looks like some of these little guide wires or systems might be a little bit damaged. We've got our different tail and the other turret system here with those parts added. And we're missing the little piece here from the sprue, but that's sort of like the fairing for the turret at the rear of the tail. And we've got pretty much the exact same clear sprues, except they've added this extra little frame here, and that's for our turret, which, as you can see, has some very tiny little windows. Definitely nothing like what's on the Lancasters, where you've got a little bit more of a visibility. I'd imagine being in that would have been even more awful. But yeah, for the most part, pretty good. Although I reckon these windows are even more distorted on this tooling, so maybe the kit was a bit older when this came out, hence the bits falling off, a little bit of extra flashing, and the quality being a little bit worse. So as I've mentioned, I'll probably try and vacuum form these or make replacements, seeing as I've got a few 177s to fix up and build. But yeah, otherwise, pretty much exact same kit, just those different weapons. I don't think you can get this kit anymore as easily as the other one, because they haven't reissued it. At the end of the day, the A5 was more produced. The only difference is those turrets and the different weapons, which you could probably find replacements or 3D print them anyways if you wanted.
So that wraps up our look at these 2 Heinkel 177s from Revell. I picked both of these up secondhand on Facebook Marketplace for around about 40 AUD each, plus shipping. So a pretty good price, and hence why I bought 2 of them in the end. Although the 2018 kit is still around, it usually retails, I've seen, for anything from about 50 to 70 AUD, depending on where you get it from, and it does seem to still be reasonably easy to find, at least in Australia. So I hope you enjoyed this rather long inbox review of these 2 kits. I will be doing build videos for each of them at some point in the future, although it may be a little bit of time before I get around to finishing them, and they probably won't be done together. But otherwise, thanks for watching this video, and if you want to help support my channel, please consider leaving a like and also subscribing. And if you have any questions or suggestions for future videos or any comments about this kit, then leave it down in the comment section below. Big shout out, as always, to my wonderful patrons for helping me to not only fund buying these kits, but also the products I use to make them and helping me pay a little bit for the time I put into making these videos and kits. I've got plenty of other projects in the works, so stay tuned for more videos, but otherwise, thanks again, and until the next video, as always, take care and model on.